welcome everybody. So glad for so many of you to join, and I know some others may be joining in just a moment. I am Drew Jameson, core faculty with our Marriage and Family Therapy Department here at ACU, and I'm a member of the Faculty Development Initiative Committee, and have the honor of being the host for today and getting to introduce our speaker presenter for our time together. So today we do have Lacy Castleman, who is, I want to get the title exactly right, the Associate Manager of Instructional Design. And we were trying to figure out how long she's been here the other day. I've had the privilege of getting to do some course redesign work with Lacy on 2 or 3 courses at least, it seems like. But she's been here 3 years this coming August, and has just contributed a whole lot. Just seems like it's been longer than that in my mind. So Lacy's going to present some more to us today about AI and how it can be incorporated into our work. I'd sit here, like maybe many of you that have just been really wary of AI. And so I'm thankful for those that can help us calm our fears. And so Lacy also does have some teaching experience. She teaches at a local college where she is. So she's not just coming from an ID approach, but also as a teacher. So with no further delay, I will turn it over to Lacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining on. And I'm so glad the FDI invited us to speak on this. I know it's a big topic, so I'm grateful for your openness to listen to me talk about it. I hope it opens up the floor for us to brainstorm together and gives us some strategies to start with to keep learning more. So today we're going to talk about how the authentic learning approach provides a framework for educators to develop AI-resistant assessments. So that was kind of our task on what to talk about, AI-resistant assessments. But as we know, nothing can really be AI proofed, like 100%, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how we can at least work to improve our assignments and also incorporate AI in some of them as well. We'll talk about that towards the end. But the strategies that I'm going to talk about today are recommended by the OLC, and institutions nationwide are working on their assignments in the same ways. So it's grounded by evidence-based principles. So I hope that you feel at ease that that's where I'm coming from. But all right, let's get started. All right, so we're going to start with the highlighting the learning objective. If you've come with us through course development, you know we're very serious about our learning objectives. So today is no different for me. I'm going to be sure we get started with our learning objectives. Then we're going to dive into the authentic learning approach and how we can create AI resistant. Notice I'm not saying AI proof, but AI resistant assignments. Talk through some examples, how we can develop our rubrics to support the cause and align with what we're hoping to improve in our assignments. And then also how we can encourage authentic learning with AI-centered assignments. So with that, we'll dive into a few tools that are available for free, some examples on how we can use AI, and then at the end, I have some resources. You might notice there's a few links throughout. And just know that at the very end, I have a slide with all the links, and then we'll share this presentation out as well so that you can click on them and see kind of what I'm referring to. Okay, so whether we are planning either an AI-focused or an AI-resistant assessment, it's important that we focus on the learning objective, right? So as I've said, rarely can we be 100% AI-proof. So when we say that we're aiming for AI resistance, this means we're working to level up our assignments so that it would be more difficult to use AI to complete it, or it would be more difficult to get a substantial correct response from AI if they were to try. So while completely banning AI might be difficult for us to achieve, designing our assessments to prioritize meaningful learning around the learning objective, that's going to help us reach our goal, which is the student learns what they need to learn, right? So this shifts our focus away from how do we prevent the use of AI and a little more towards how can we be sure that the learning objective is met and better assessed and met in a meaningful way for the student. So specifically, when we're talking about designing our objectives, we want to focus on what's the essential, right? What's our goal? What does the student need to learn? But also, we want to consider how do they need to be able to use that knowledge? So with that, we want to take into consideration the context that students might need to use their knowledge in the real world. How can you better design your objective or assignment to tap into the way that that knowledge might be used in the real world? So for example, let's say we're rethinking our assignment. Right now, students are writing a paper on the developmental milestones of each phase of childhood. So what's the goal here? Is it to learn how to write or identify the key developmental milestones, right? That's probably going to be the essential goal. What are the developmental milestones? So that's the goal, the essentials. Now take it to the application. Keep asking questions. How do students need to be able to use this knowledge? Do they need to be able to write a paper about it? Or do they need to be able to identify if a patient has met the milestones? If so, what steps are needed to serve the patient and what decisions do they make? I should probably have asked Drew to talk on this because that's actually his expertise. And if I keep talking, I'll need a SME to chime in for me. But as you begin to start asking these questions, you might find that maybe writing a paper isn't the best way to demonstrate this knowledge after all. Maybe a case study or a video demonstration of working with a client, that might be more beneficial. So when you're considering revising your objective and your assignment to be more specific to the type of learning that needs to take place, that thought process will help you develop authentic learning objectives and assignments. When we start to dive into authentic learning experiences, this is what can encourage critical thinking, creativity, higher levels of learning focused on the actual learning objective and how students can apply that knowledge. So I've emphasized authentic a lot here. So that's our that's our introduction to the authentic learning approach. Throughout this presentation, we're going to use that as we start talking about different strategies to work on our assignments. And we'll dive on that just a bit. We'll talk a little bit in a very small nutshell on what can and can't AI do. This is a very, very high level overview, but generally, as you're thinking through revising your assignments to focus on that higher order thinking and redesigning your assignments, it's going to be helpful to consider, keep in mind, and play around with AI. What can and can't AI do? AI can write plausible sounding text on any topic and very plausible, which I'm sure we've all gotten to know very well with the responses that we've gotten from students or that we've seen when we've played around with it as well. It's a great task or great at tasks such as summarization, organizing your thoughts, brainstorming. It can also plagiarize directly from sources. So it's important to know that that is something that can take place because students might be using it and not even knowing that they're plagiarizing. AI can also generate incorrect information. That also sounds really plausible. So this is actually a good thing if you want to look at your glass half full. So students need to understand what is correct and not correct in order to use the AI generated text, right? So they have to be able to have a source of knowledge to come from when they're using text, or they need to learn that they still need to know what's right and wrong if they're going to use AI generated text. On the other hand, fake, incorrect information might be easy to spot. So as you get more familiar with using AI tools, you might be able to start to see, oh, this is very generic and that's not what I'm looking for here. So being able to spot that content and rework your assignment and your rubric to grade for more meaningful connections can be helpful. As of now, the AI cannot think critically in the way that humans do. Okay, so it can generate responses and do so confidently, but the response may lack meaning and value. So this means they can't think critically because AI doesn't know what to value more than other pieces of information. All information is equal in the world of AI. So it doesn't know how to weigh and reason and make decisions in the same way that a human would be able to do. So what does this mean? We are tasked with the challenge of designing assessments that require that type of deep reflection, relation to various perspectives, ethical considerations, decision-making, judgment, all those higher level learnings of Bloom's taxonomy, to encourage our students to connect meaningfully with the content. When we require students to work in those upper levels of learning, higher order thinking, they have a much more higher likelihood of having a meaningful connection and better motivation and engagement, whether they use AI or not. Okay, one other thing I think I might have skipped over here. Oh, wait, no, I think that's good. Yeah. Oh, so I also want to be clear, it doesn't mean that I'm saying we can no longer assign papers. Like, that's not what I'm saying. It just means that we might want to level up our assignments, change the way we go about the process of writing a paper, building that into the process for students, upgrading our rubrics to tailor it more towards authentic learning. All right, so the big question, how do we develop AI-resistant assessments? With the authentic learning approach, this approach emphasizes real-world relevance, meaningful engagement with course material. So instead of focusing on recall, memorization, definition, summarization, authentic learning requires students to apply their knowledge to practical, real-world problem solving, to think critically in a variety of contexts. This higher order thinking can minimize the potential for misuse of AI tools. So again, you'll hear me make that disclosure a lot. We can't keep them 100% from using it. We can't completely ensure they don't use AI, but it can reduce the AI's ability to provide a useful, deep, meaningful, or correct response. So while we're promoting the learning experience to encourage engagement and motivation, we are asking students to level up their learning. So with that, we're going to have to be tasked with leveling up our assignments and improving the learning experience to foster critical thinking and authentic learning. So these are the strategies I was talking about earlier that are recommended by the OLC. They're rooted in evidence-based learning principles around the authentic learning approach. So to talk through this, we'll go through a few different strategies. I'm going to talk through them a little briefly here, and we got a slide for each one. So context-specific personalization. This is where we are requiring students to apply their learning to personal experiences, unique perspectives, applying to specific case studies or very specific references from the course. We've got process-oriented, so that's where we are building the process of the project or of the assignment into the assignment as a requirement. So instead of turning in a final product, students are documenting the process along the way. Open-ended prompts and dynamic context. This is where we can really do a deep dive into our prompts and see how we can emphasize critical thinking, rethink or revise them to promote that authentic learning, those critical real-world experiences that they might be able to use their knowledge for. So avoiding simple yes or no, define, describe, and instead open-ended situations, dynamic prompts, maybe they're group activities or students are needing to make decisions or judgments, maybe they're conducting an interview. And then diversity of formats, so combining multiple types of formats can encourage students to be creative and give them an opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge in a variety of ways. And I think this actually put it in a different order than the slides, but just roll with me, it'll be okay. All right, we're starting with context-specific prompts. So again, personalization, this is asking students to apply their learning to their own personal experiences of others. So I'd encourage you to be as specific as possible. Make it as hard as you can for AI to be able to relate to it, right? Students can draw from their own personal life experiences of their peers or family. Maybe they need to conduct an interview with a classmate or with their neighbor, things like that, very specific context. Another way would be to incorporate real world scenarios. So case studies, real life examples, designing assessments that mirror real world tasks will make it more relevant to them, right? They're going to see how they need to use this knowledge for once they get into their career and to use it going forward. It can also be helpful. Course material integration. If you've worked with us through course development, I know you know we're very particular about how many references do we need here, right? But leveling that up, maybe not just mentioning a minimum of 2 references. Maybe you clarify how do they need to use the references to support their responses. Really add in the steps to be sure students are learning how to incorporate referencing specific text in their responses. Another context that would be very specific, community context. Maybe you have students analyze a policy or program in their own city or state. That also helps it be more relevant to them as well. And ideally, you may use a variety of these, right? It's not one size fits all. So keep in mind as we go along, pairing these, combining these strategies together will give you a really well-rounded, high-level assignment. Okay, process oriented. As an accounting instructor, this one's my favorite because a lot of my homework that I assign is problem based. So students they have very long problems that they're working through to create statements, and each step along the way they're graded on, and they have chance to get feedback along the way as well. So I'm pro courseware, and I love having tools like that to help us document the process. But that's also a strategy that you can apply in a variety of ways. So we're placing emphasis on the steps taken to complete the assignment, not just the final product or the final answer. So another way, other than coursework or like working through a problem step by step like that, would be maybe you have students record a video of themselves explaining how they solved a problem. You can give them a specific perspective or tone to where maybe they're teaching this to a student younger than them. So and I know all of us as instructors know you really have to know something if you're going to teach it to somebody else, right? So that would be a fun way to build the process into it as well. In research-based assignments, you can request a timeline of the steps or the order of the steps the students took to complete the research process, along with justification of the sources that they used. In addition to just the final paper, you can ask students to annotate directly on the course material or a source or a study that they've found online with track changes or comments. So they're providing their comments and notes with their own interpretations, questions they may have, or connections to other content directly on the source. It can really demonstrate their process of reading comprehension, and that also gives you a view of what the student's getting out of the source. Maybe there's something they haven't seen, or maybe there's some ways that you can help them connect the source even more to the course material that you have. And then documenting the process. So you can require drafts. I know many of us have scaffolded assignments. This would be part of that. Or you can have them just in that final assignment when they're submitting their final, include the pieces that they needed from the very beginning. Ask them to include their drafts, the steps they use to get to that final product. This can include them reflecting on their thought process, their challenges, their insights. This can be scaffolded assignments built throughout the course, or you can have them included as a part of any assignment. So it pushes students to articulate how they arrived at the solution and the strategies they used, kind of have them going through that metacognitive reflection on like, okay, how did I do this? How am I learning? Is it beneficial? Like, how can I keep going and things like that? All right, diversify assignment formats. Again, if you've been through our course development process, we've got lots of different pages on all different ways that you can set up your assignments. And bonus points, this strategy is also recommended for online learning in general, right? The Universal Design for Learning Guidelines always recommends to allow students to demonstrate their knowledge in different ways. so that we can better accommodate our students that have a diverse set of needs. So, and providing different types of formats allows them to be creative as well, which can always improve our engagement and our motivation. And whenever we talk about different types, this can mean multiple types for one assignment. You can combine them. Maybe they are recording a video presentation of just them speaking, but they're also submitting a paper, or maybe they've created a presentation, but they're also going to embed their audio. But this also means different variety of assignments throughout the entire course. So that way they're not having the same, I'm writing a paper every single week, and they're just totally exhausted of writing papers. So they're like, ChatGPT, help me out, right? So we want to add some variety to keep up the engagement, encourage creativity, and remember that they're the ones putting the content into that format, right? Somebody has to know, they have to know what content they're putting in the format. So even if they do use an AI tool, they're still the ones putting in the knowledge to make the product. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So other examples, recording a podcast, and really dig in. You don't need to just, it can be simple, create a podcast, but be specific when you're talking about the format so that students are required to go really fully exhaust what they know about the topic. Encourage them to write an intro, and maybe they need to fill that intro with some research that they have to back what they're going to be talking about during the main part of the podcast. Have them discuss a real solid decision that they've made, or a point that they'd like to justify, and summarize that in the conclusion. So there's ways to build in your really amazing prompts in different formats like these. E-portfolios are a great way to showcase variety of assignments to meet lots of different types of prompts. Infographics, we know that's academic poster, brochures, newsletters. These are visual ways that they can organize and present their information, but also from a different lens. So not only do they need to know about the information, but they need to know how to tailor it to a particular audience or a particular goal. And then again, and the same for the concept map, the website, and then combining multiple formats is always great. Like I said, combining these strategies in any way that you think would be helpful will create a great, well-rounded assignment. All right, so open-ended and dynamic context and prompts. This is kind of like the catch-all, but we really want to talk about how we can rewrite our prompts. Something that I think this would be utilized with any of the strategies we've talked through so far. So you've got to have it to your core of your assignment is, what are you asking of students, right? And then how are you going to have them demonstrate it? But when we're talking about what we're asking of them, we want to use prompts that require critical thinking and further analysis. So like we've mentioned, we want to avoid define, summarize, describe. If that's the goal that you have for them, that maybe that's all they need to do, then that's okay. Maybe they have an activity where they're creating flashcards for themselves, right? But if they need to dig in deep and you're not just introducing the content, we want them to be able to use this content in a way that's relevant and meaningful to learn more, then we want to build in justification, decision-making. We want to further your prompt with guiding bullets, as detailed as you can get in your prompt. Instead of just like a one-sentence prompt, consider adding bullets to where you're furthering explaining how they can demonstrate their thought process, how they can incorporate course materials, and how they can break down their process and their decision-making. You can also add in situational prompts, so tailoring prompts to refer to even a previous assignment in the course, a previous discussion, interview assignments, right? That's going to be very specific that students are going to need to tailor their answers to. And group projects, students can work together. Maybe they're creating a strategic plan for a final project, and you can divide up roles and responsibilities. Adding a role for everybody will give them their own dynamic perspective that they need to work with their classmates on. Jigsaw activities, that's where if you have a group, each member of the group has one part of the topic that they research, and then each person comes back to the group and presents it to each other. So they get to kind of play teacher and then also get a chance to learn from each other. And peer evaluation, if you're ever going to loop in or integrate peer evaluation, it's helpful to include a rubric. So instead of just, hey, share your thoughts on your classmates' paper or your classmates' plan, give a rubric for them to evaluate it against. And it'll be more meaningful for them to actually have a criteria. They'll need some background information from what they've learned that week to be sure that they can provide an accurate and meaningful evaluation. Okay, just a few examples to talk through. We had one course that came through that was really, the SME was really wanting to have an upgrade. They had put it into ChatGPT and they were totally freaked out, which happens to all of us. I don't know about you guys, but I know that's happened to me too. So they wanted to think through how they can upgrade their assignment. So for example, now this is very brief. I had to fit it on a slide. But it started with just reflecting on a quote and discussing in a paper the planning, recruiting, and selection process and for hiring. And if you put that into ChatGPT, it came back with a pretty great response, right? And so after that, they redesigned their assignment to instead, they put the students in a scenario. You've been tasked with filling an opening for a warehouse manager at S&S Logistics. This me created a profile for each candidate and gave the students a scorecard specifically. So the students had to review each candidate's profile and compare it to the recruitment info in the scorecard to detail and analyze and identify the top candidate. So with that, they then had to justify their hiring decision and the factors that went into that. So this pulls in, I think, just almost everything that we've talked about so far. They had the very specific context, right? A case or the case or the profiles were very specific. They had the process thinking built in. They had to document their thought process of how they selected and identified their candidate by documenting it on their scorecard. That scorecard is also a unique format. So that's, again, diversifying the format. And then they had decision making and justification and critical thinking. So they've got it all right there. So this is a good example of how you can take something simple and add it on a little bit. And let me see here. Okay. And then next, I want to talk about rubrics. If you've worked so hard to develop guiding prompts that encourage authentic learning, higher order thinking, we want to be sure that you are capturing this in your rubric and students are actually being assessed on all this hard work that you've done to update your assignment. So whenever we are building in critical thinking into our rubrics, first, I would say avoid the phrase just student thinks critically, right? We need to actually outline what students need to provide that shows that they've thought critically. When we develop rubrics for prioritizing critical thinking, the process over just recall, define, and describe, this helps ensure that the rubric is going to mirror the instructions. So if you're having them do these high-level thinking and processes in the prompts, we want the rubric to be just as detailed so that it can be captured transparent for the student, but also a consistent grading experience for faculty as well. Okay, so next I'll talk through some examples of criteria that you can include based on the strategies that we've talked about so far. Now, these are pretty detailed slides, just because I wanted you to be able to use them in your assignments if you wanted to. But with that being said, these are not tailored enough to an actual assignment. So they're thoughts to get you started. You would, of course, want to tailor this even further, break it down a little more based on what you're adding to your assignment. Okay, so when designing rubrics, specific criteria for personalization that evaluates like the depth and authenticity of that personal voice. So instead of just simply saying student reflected on their personal experience, you want to actually break it down. Do they have a unique voice that they're bringing out? Are they including a thoughtful reflection that draws from multiple experiences, also connecting to course content? Do they Do they show self-awareness, and can they think through the learning that they've made from the beginning of the end? Context specific criteria. So instead of just, student answer the question based on the case study, right? Integrate maybe instead you would say, student integrate specific details and evidence from the case study. Decisions were made with support from the readings, right? They thoughtfully integrated the course concepts with the readings and the class activities, thorough application of at least 2 sources. And you can even go further than that, right? Instead of minimum of 2 references, maybe they have thoroughly applied the support from 2 sources for this prompt, right? And depending on how you've built your assignment. So as specific as you can, so that students can be evaluated at the level that you're hoping them to reach. Process-oriented criteria. So this, like we mentioned, encourages them to document their learning journey with drafts, research notes, reflections. Effective rubrics will evaluate how well they explain their processes, they document the decisions made. So you can ask them to submit outlines, rough drafts, kind of what we've already talked about, right? But instead of just saying document the process, we want to take a look at the detailed instructions that we have in the prompt, and we want to see those in the rubric as well, because students will see, oh yeah, this is going to be graded on. I need to be sure that this is how much I need to include. So it provides you with a little more emphasis on what's going to be valued in the grading process. So just a few more examples of different processes. You can ask students to integrate feedback, and then in that rubric, you can explain how should the feedback have been integrated. Like, did they just make minor changes? Can you see that the paper has improved based on what the feedback they've received? Have they gone more in depth in the topic? Are they adding on different varieties or perspectives? And examples like that. All right. I know these are a little self-explanatory, so I can go a little bit quicker over these, but just a reminder that to be as specific as possible. We, especially when we have unique formats, I think students are used to seeing a range of word count, APA format. But when you have a unique format, such as a podcast or an e-portfolio or an infographic, it will be helpful to be additionally mindful of what part of those pieces do you want to build into the rubric, and how can students use that format to better get their message across. Okay, and this is the last rubric criteria, I promise. If you've been through course development, you know how I feel about rubrics. And this is a resource you can come back to later. And I'm sure ChatGPT can give you some great examples, more than what I have here, but just to get you thinking on how far down you can break down your rubric. Now, you don't need to copy and paste every single word from the instructions into the rubric. That's not what I'm saying. But when you're really ensuring that students are justifying their response, creating thorough rationales, incorporating support from their references, collaborating with their peers, just keep in mind, those are the types of things that we want to be extra detailed about in the instructions and in the rubric, so that students know, okay, here's the steps I need to do to be successful. All right, now spoiler alert, combining authentic learning, all of these approaches that we've talked about so far, with AI-focused assignment is going to give you the best of both worlds. It's going to give you the most bang for your buck, right? So just a reminder, like, AI is more than Gemini, ChatGPT, and all the other tools that you've known of. It's built into a lot of tools already, okay? It's even more than we probably know. It's built into Canva, it's built into Grammarly, and it's getting built depending on the access and licenses, and it's getting built into more things. And as time goes on, it's likely that it's going to be more accessible, the free versions as well. So it's very important and crucial that we teach students how to use AI so that they are well prepared when they enter the workplace, because AI is already being utilized more and more in the workplace, and we wouldn't want to send students off into the world without preparing them or equipping with them with the tools that they need to be successful at their job. So including AI activities shows students how to evaluate AI and understand they can't rely on it as a sole source, right? It's not always going to be correct. Because I don't know that students know that. And I'm sure y'all have noticed they probably don't realize that AI's information is incorrect sometimes. So we need to help teach them that they need a solid understanding of their content to be able to evaluate and correct AI generated content to get the most out of their use, or to get the most out of it. Guiding students on evaluating AI output and on alignment with a specific context or reference can be super helpful. So when giving an assignment that uses AI, we're including a critical analysis component. So if they are asking AI to generate a response and then we want them to align it with a course material or a resource, a specific resource, or perhaps they need to find their own resource, then students can take a look at how did AI perform? Did it do poorly? Does it need room for improvement? How can I include my own thinking into this response? We want students to start thinking of that so that they know how to improve on the basic text generalized, basic general text that we get from AI. All right, we can also guide students on evaluating the AI by having them track changes on the response. So remember how we talked about, remember, my words are getting shorter. I'm trying to squeeze in the rest of the presentation now. Remember how we mentioned annotating a source, students directly annotating that to evaluate a source and document their process on reading comprehension. We can ask students to track changes on a document from AI. They can put in a prompt for AI to generate a response and then have them track changes and be very specific. You can say you need to make 10 improvements and it needs to be rooted from at least these 3 sources. So whatever you think is acceptable to and whatever deep analysis means to you, build that into the instructions and teach them how to utilize AI. So not only are they learning what you want them to learn, but they're learning how to use AI and they're learning how to use it responsibly. You can also ask them to document if you're encouraging the use of AI for brainstorming, outlining, preparing for the final assignment, you can ask them to cite and specify the exact AI generated content that they've used, right? You can ask them to document the initial prompt, how they changed their paper based on that prompt, and any follow-up questions that they had as well. Okay, encouraging students to use the tool to create an image or an artifact can also be a fun way to represent their learning. If you want them to use AI to create an artifact or create something, then that'll be a helpful point to have them note their prompts. What did they use to generate the image or the artifact, whatever you're having them generate? Like, for example, we have an assignment that our Dr. Tiffany Dahlman helped developed, where students are creating an image of Jesus using AI based on the prompts that they're generating to create that image. So the student is going to need to do some work on what Jesus means to them to create that image. Okay, so those prompts that are being input into the chat GPT, that's the student knowledge. That's what's getting connected with the student, right? So the focus when we're having AI tools and we're encouraging the use and encouraging students to be creative with them, the focus is on the input provided by the student. So it's not necessarily the final goal if they have, let me rephrase that. It's not necessarily their ability to create a graphic, right? Because it's not a graphic design course. Or even if it's not a writing course, maybe the goal isn't to write a paper, but instead we can use the tool for them to input their knowledge and create something out of it. So they are rooting the final product in their knowledge and their expertise and the meaningful connection, and the AI is just helping them present that. Okay, I also wanted to touch on another idea of, combining authentic learning and AI-centered assignments because I had another example. I was recently just talking to a colleague that asked me to help them improve their discussion. So currently she's just asking them, remember I teach accounting, so she was asking them to just define the double entry accounting bookkeeping system. It's very early on in the financial accounting, so it is introductory, but she can tell she really wanted to level it up. So we chatted through. Instead, I recommended that they take students through a scenario, have them consider maybe they are an owner of a baker, ask what transactions would occur in a regular day if they were using the double entry system. Then have them explain how the system would help them better track their revenues and expenses. So we've applied the authentic approach, right? Just by leveling up that prompt a little bit. But now let's think about adding in AI. So AI could possibly provide a great response to that, right? If we're adding on AI, maybe we have students insert that prompt into ChatGPT, and they have to put that response into a document, and then they annotate specific examples and explanations that they receive from ChatGPT and confirm if they're correct. And if they can confirm that they're correct, how are they confirming? Like find that from the text, find that from their examples, try to identify what AI got wrong if they did, and or how it can be better elaborated. So we were talking through listing all the specific steps that can really dive into that topic more than just a simple definition. Requiring a minimum number of annotations, adding in support from the reliable course materials. We're teaching students they can't solely rely on AI, but we need to integrate our knowledge and our learning from the course to be sure that we can evaluate it for accuracy. So students can learn about the double entry accounting system, and they can also learn about AI. Win-win. Okay, there's another list of resources here that I recommend that you check on it a little bit later because we're running short on time, and if I click on it, it'll probably get me out of my presentation, but it will help to clarify and guide students on what's responsible use in your course. And if you do come through course development and that's something you'd like to do, we will be sure to partner with academics. We will have another set of eyes from our vice provost of academics to be sure that any language gets approved and is in alignment with the vision for ACU Online. But I have a few resources here that I thought were really helpful. Google has a very brief checklist just for general use. This is actually from the Google, they have a Coursera course for Google certification. And I might need to make sure this is viewable for everyone. So I'll be sure that everybody can click on that. The AI assessment scale, I love this tool. This is developed by an international researcher and education consultant who is getting his dissertation on AI and education. And I like this scale because it provides an explanation on each level of AI use on how it can be used in the classroom, but it also provides guidance on how it can be implemented. Like, for example, the level 1, no AI use permitted at all. That would be something that can be heavily monitored, right? So a live class, something that can be proctored or something like that. And then to the very end, AI encouraged no restrictions at all. There's lots of different explanations of the levels and ways that students can cite their process or document it. And I think that's a great tool to look through. They've also revisited the scale. So on the very final slide, I have 2 links for you, but I need to get through this a little quicker. So I'm going to just know I've got some links for you at the end. Okay. There's lots of different tools, and I'm sure as we go on, more and more are going to be available. And there's different models that do different levels of work, especially when you get from like free and paid. But just here's some examples of ones that are available now. I used a presentation tool, Gamma. That one was paid, but I learned that I should have been starting my presentation when I first opened it, right? Because I had already created my presentation and I imported it into Gamma, and I was like, oh my gosh, I could have been doing this from here the whole time. So I really encourage you to go out there, practice what you can get your hands on to get familiar with how you can use it. and because it'll help you figure out how you can use it to help yourself develop learning objectives, how you can use it to create rubrics, improve your course resources. And the more that you play around with it and get familiar with it, that it can help you brainstorm ways that you can improve your assignments, or incorporate it into assignments as well. I wanted to add a few tips on creating specific prompts. This is something I found really helpful because when I first started working with ChatGPT, I just put in a question and it'd give me like 3 pages of info. And I'm like, this is too much. And then I would just go back to what I was doing. So I was not getting the best use out of it until I learned to be as specific as you can. Tell it its role. Like you're an instructional designer, tell it the audience at a higher education institution. Give it clear parameters of what you're asking for, as much context. And I didn't realize you can specify output. I want the response to be 200 words or less, or I want it to fit on 1 page. I would like the response in a table format. That is so helpful when you're organizing your notes that you tell ChatGPT how you want the output to be given to you. And my favorite tip that I learned when I was doing some research was to tell ChatGPT or any AI chatbot that you're working with, ask me questions if you need more information. That, for some reason, that was life-changing to me because I would put in a prompt and then I would tell it to ask me more questions if it needs more info. And the questions it came back with were just incredibly helpful on how I could have given it more information to give me a better response. So I highly recommend playing around with that. I have a few examples. Like the first one is very, very specific. Let's talk through it. So we've got a role. You're a college professor creating an assignment for an undergraduate healthcare course. That's your audience. The objective for the assignment is going to be our context, likely, right? The assignment should require decision-making, real-world context. The output should be no longer than 350 words. So that's giving some parameters and specifics on the output. So I have a few examples here. It can be simple. You don't have to get all of those specifics in there. Just a reminder that if you want it to help you, the more specific, the better. So instead of saying, create a rubric for this assignment, even just adding in, create a 10-point rubric with these categories will give you a much better response that's more helpful instead of just throwing a bunch of information that's like, oh, this is too much. And for this assignment revision example, I asked ChatGPT to give me an effective prompt to revise an assignment to be AI resistant. And that's what it gave me. So, and then I was like, why didn't I ask you for the prompts that I had already written before I got to this point on the slide? So it's really helpful. It can even help you create better assignments to fight it, I guess. I don't know the right word. To be resistant against it, not fight it. That's not the right word. And another big tip is refine. If you are not getting exactly what you want, keep asking follow-up questions. It's gonna help you tailor it and make sure that it meets the needs that you want it to. For example, you can give students an assignment that you already have, and you can ask it, create a scaffolded assignment to help students prepare for this assignment. And then you can follow up and say, okay, but I need this, and I need this, and I need this. And then before you know it, you've got a really great starting point. And a lot of the writer's block and getting started part is that barrier has been broken down. Okay, here's my list of resources. I do think I skipped over a few. I wanted to highlight the Bloom's taxonomy that's on the very first one. I realized I didn't mention it. That one's not on this slide because it's linked early on though, but early on in the presentation, I just forgot to mention that it's a great resource to think through how Bloom's taxonomy can be a part of our process with AI, or excuse me, how we can develop our learning objectives, keeping in mind Bloom's taxonomy and how it's impacted by AI. So I forgot to mention that earlier. And I ran out of space on this page, so I couldn't add it here. And that's it. We have any questions? And if you come to the FDI session next week with your questions, you can bring your assignments and we can talk through and brainstorm together how we can revise them, create them AI resistant or AI focused or whatever you'd like. It would be fun to see some of the ideas that you have. I'd love to learn with you guys on that. That's all.
Lacy, I don't have any questions. I know you've got my wheels turning big time. I love the idea of just having students use AI and correct it. That just makes so much sense. That takes the concern of them using AI out of it, and yet have them applying their knowledge. I think that's a really cool idea. Something I'm going to be playing around with.
Yeah, and I think it teaches them that they need to correct it because I really think a lot of students they're not trying to cheat, they just want to learn and they really might not know how to make that next step to be sure that they're still thinking critically. So I think that's our role is to really help them learn how to better connect.
Yeah. So Lacy, lots of thank yous coming in the chat room. Thank you,
Thank you
Lacy.
all for joining.
It was fantastic, just absolutely very relevant information and intriguing information, and wish you could keep going. But I know you've got somewhere to be, as do probably the majority of us. So that's why we are doing our table talks. So as Lacy referred to, next Thursday, same time, same place, here 11 a.m. Central on the 15th. Join us for our table talk, and there will be time to ask questions. I know Amanda will be here too, and I think they might also show us some more things if there's not a whole lot of questions. So join us for the table talk next week. And then I will remind you of our summer 2 presentation, continued wealth of knowledge from our ID department. Sarah Laster will be presenting on using AI as a learning tool. So she will get more specific on that with us and how we can incorporate that in the classroom. So again, Lacy, thank you so very much for this information. And for all of you that were here in attendance, thank you for being here. If you're watching this on recording later, I'm sure that Lacy would be open to even questions, moving on in the future as well.
Yes,
So
thank you. Yeah, please feel free to chat me or email me. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to get to share with you all and learn from you all. So thank you.